And wherever we are back from a very long weekend. This is Joy News, independent, fearless, and credible. I trust you had a wonderful weekend and you had time with your family. But we are back with another exciting edition of The Pulse here on Joy News. My name is Elton Bobe. We are live on DSTV channel 421, Go TV 125. We are on X Spaces, we are on Facebook, we are on YouTube, and of course we are on myjoyonline.com. Always a pleasure to have you here on The Pulse. My name is Elton Bobe. Well, this afternoon, anxiety among staff of the Electricity Company of Ghana and NEDCO source as the Technical Committee tasked with exploring private sector involvement in Ghana's power distribution officially presents its recommendation to the Minister of Energy and Green Transition. We have more plus reaction from the sectors in this area as to whether or not privatization is the way to go. Also, Joy News checks confirmed the minorities claim that Air Med NA23AM indeed touched down in Ghana and was at the Kotoka International Airport for 5 days before flying back to Gran Canaria.
Minority Caucus calls on national security to, as a matter of urgency, make public the content of cargo suspected to be cocaine and cash transported into the country by 2 suspicious flights.
And we'll tell you what we found and President Mahama's directive to the state security institutions to investigate the claims of the minority that flights may have been used to traffic drugs. Also this afternoon, Ghana Army and Chinese Embassy in talks to free 3 Chinese nationals kidnapped by pirates off Ghana's coast.
And then 3 crew members were abducted. But even the Chinese ministry and China as a country is confirming that the abducted citizens.
Also to come, Minister of Roads and Highways direct 2 local contractors to begin intensive sport maintenance of Dawenya and Afianya roads, which are under construction, to ease congestion with the roads deteriorating over the slow pace of construction.
Immediately, I'm asking First Sky Group to help MMU to remedy all that we can do to ease the problem on the motorway runabout towards Central University.
Is the only woman among 4 gentlemen seeking to lead the Africa Development Bank. This afternoon, I'll be speaking to Swazi Chabalala, the only woman in the race to head the Africa Development Bank presidency. These and many more coming your way here on The Pulse with me, Elton Brobe. Stay tuned. When we come back, we'll settle with the details. Live on DSTV channel 421, Go TV 125. We are on X Spaces, on YouTube, on Facebook, and of course on myjoyonline.com. And of course, we'll start off from the president. And it's something that is being in the offing. Now it's official, but yet to see implementation. President John Mahama has fulfilled a key campaign promise by signing into law this morning a set of amended bills that abolish the betting tax, E-levy tax, and the emission tax, among others. The signing, which has been completed in its first major steps in his administration's quest to bring relief to Ghanaians, took place at the Jubilee House this morning. It is aimed to reduce the financial burden these taxes impose on individuals that transacted business using the apps that were available. We can listen to the president append his signature to these matters at the Jubilee House.
This is the Electronic Transfer Levy Repeal Bill. That's the famous E-levy bill. I'll proceed to sign it. Okay, I've just given assent to the repeal of the famous E-levy bill. Now, this is the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2025 to remove withholding tax on winnings from lottery, betting, and games of chance. This is the famous betting tax repeal bill. And so I'll assent to it, 2nd April 2025. So betting tax is gone. Now, this is the emissions tax repeal bill. So, Emissions Levy Repeal Act 2025, emissions levy is gone. This is the earmark funds capping and realignment bill. This is the bill that caps the GET fund and National Health Insurance levy and moves those resources into the consolidated fund. We promise that we'll take the capping off, we'll uncap them. And so this bill uncaps the GET fund and the National Health Insurance levy. So the earmark funds capping and realignment amendment bill has been assented to. So it means GET Fund and NHIL will receive the full amount of their levies. Promises delivered.
Right, so a lot of signing took place this morning at the Jubilee House. The ultimate is a fulfillment of the president's pledge before and after the campaign to have these taxes repealed. Now the signing ceremony is concluded. What is left is for some collaboration to now take place between the Ghana Revenue Authority and, of course, those who are taking the charge on behalf of government to make sure that the relevant, adjustment is made so that the taxes will be off, especially with regards to Momo and, of course, the Burton. For more on this is the Chief Economist at PIE, Dr. Daniel Enim. Also joining us is the National Public Relations Officer of the Mobile Money Agents Association, Charles Kwesiado. Charles, good afternoon and welcome to the Pulse.
Good afternoon.
So first, let me get your reaction to what happened at the Jubilee House this morning. Parliament repealed it.
Yeah.
The president has assented to it. What's your reaction to what has just happened?
Yes, so it's a good news, Elton. To us as mobile money agents, and equally doubles as subscribers, it's a good news to us and equally a good news to Ghanaians. But we must say that the president has done really a yeoman's job, at least right from today down to the rest of the days and the years ahead. We are hoping and praying that government will take crucial measures in formalizing policies for the ordinary citizens, because there were a lot of agitation way back in 2022 since the introduction of the E-levy. The effect was enormous. We talked about it, but probably they didn't pay heed to us. Most of the projected amounts that they were anticipating, almost they were able to realize 50% of that. So that should tell the leadership that it is not all well with them. The data that they use to propel policies in terms of their estimated amount or expected realized amount is not the actuals on the ground. And therefore, they need to pay major heed to the major stakeholders in that ecosystem.
Right.
Actually, the telcos, likewise the agents.
Right. So Charles, to what extent did the imposition affect your business, especially knowing very well that the charge was on those who were doing the transaction, not those of you in the merchant business? So I'm wondering how it affected your business.
Thank you. So, like I earlier stated, we agents are businessmen. Our core objective is to maximize or break even. And therefore, agents are paid based on the volumes of transactions that are conducted before you be paid the subsequent month for your commission. And therefore, we rely solely on the volumes or the number of transactions. Since the introduction of the E-levy, people sought to do alternative. They sought for alternative, not to use the mobile money rather than to succumb to other means, probably, i.e. taking money to the lorry stations, the old ways of doing things. And therefore, when that happens, our transactional volumes reduce, i.e. Our commissions also coming down. I can say on authority that way back in 2022, 2023, we conducted a research and table a document to the ministry, then Ministry of Communication, Honorable Estela, if you could recall. We told her that the E-levy implementation is impacting our business, and therefore there's a need for us to at least review it because it is not helping the agent body. And most of the agents were having 2, 3, or 4 outlets. And because the introduction, if you look at the figures, the first 3 quarters, there was a huge decline after the implementation in the first 3 quarters. And the aftermath, when the education went well with Ghanaians, that it took siege. And therefore, I feel that leaders should consult and do proper deliberation before coming out with any policy in the future.
Then, finally, before I let you go, so what do we expect in the coming days? The presidency has signed off on it. It has left the president's desk. Now, I know that GRA will have to now have a conversation with the telecos and other bodies related to that before we can see some action really happening.
So, like you said, Ghana Revenue Authority was earmarked to take the levy, and therefore, I know that steps are already in place to make sure it is not on the system. But that repose with them and the telcos. But for us agents, we want to assure Ghanaians that, please, they should exercise patience and constraint. When they come to transact and probably E-levy still pops up, it is not the doing of the agent. And therefore, the needed authority should do the needful to make the agent work so it. I will also want to take this opportunity to draw the government attention to the insurgence of robbery attacks on the agent body. Government should move a step further to make sure that there are processes and steps to help mediate the surge of robbery attacks on agents. Lastly, from January till now, 4th of 2nd April, there have been 11 deaths across the country, with the Ashanti region recording 3 deaths, Upper East 3, and the rest spread across the country. We feel that government, because of the implementation of his 24-hour economy, the agent body or the ecosystem, the mobile money ecosystem, will be the backbone or the foundation of such a policy. And therefore, he should put steps in place to make sure that prospective investors will believe in that policy, believe in the ecosystem of the mobile money, and invest to support the government to realize its stated aim and objective.
Right. And then, do I take it that you are yet to receive any kind of communication from, let's say, Telecel, MTN, that you should stand in readiness for some changes to be done? That has yet to start, right?
As we speak now, I'm sorry, no.
All right, Daniel, let's give you a chance for now. Thank you so much. Let me bring in Dr. Daniel Enim. Dr. Daniel Enim is an economist. So, Dr. Enim, I mean, obviously, these tax measures brought in money. E-levy, for example, brought in over 6 billion on a yearly basis. Now, it's off government boost, meaning shortfall in revenue. Government says that it's got what it takes to fill in that gap that will be created by the absence of this E-levy especially. You think that it obviously had to go, and that the 2025 budget offers hope to close this gap that will be created in the absence of the E-levy?
Right. Thank you very much. I would like to analyze this from 2 perspectives. One as a citizen, and then number 1 as a professional economist. Okay. As a citizen, we are happy that, of course, we will not be paying any charges anytime you transact, you do mobile transaction. And almost every citizen is happy that the president has fulfilled the promise he has made to the good people of this country. Okay, but as an economist, my position has been, and I still maintain that position, okay, that the government could have, enjoy these taxes for the fiscal year 2025 and probably next year, then they will abolish it. Why am I saying so? You've taken over the realm of government, and then you have a better appreciation of governance in terms of revenue generation streams whenever you hit the road running. So it is against that ground that you need to take advantage of whatever taxes that are in the system, number one, to be able to beef up your domestic revenue generation. That's the first thing. Second, whatever intervention that you wanted to roll, it will take time to be able to yield the necessary results. We've abolished E-levy, and then pretty soon it will take effect. We are here to introduce the toolbox across the breadth and length of this country. So that is telling you that we are here to take action. As much as I must admit that certain innovative measures were applied in the budget, for instance, the minister indicated them taking some money from institutions like GMPC, and the like, to be able to beef up the consolidated fund in order to be able to execute some of this project. My position has been, and is still the same, that government could have tread cautiously in terms of the abolition of this, the so-called nuisance taxes. And there's a history to this. If you recall, when His Excellency Nanado took over the management of this country, and then they indicated that we're moving the economy from taxation to production, certain taxes were introduced by the then government, the Honorable Finance Minister Setekpe, which were described as nuisance taxes.
Right.
They rushed the process, abolished it. A few years along the journey, they realized that there's a huge revenue gap that ought to be addressed. Quickly, they started introducing taxes. It is against this history and this data that my view is that government could have taken advantage of the existing taxes, and probably the fiscal year 2026, it could have fulfilled that promise to the good people of Ghana by abolishing it. So we hope that the finance minister will expedite actions by ensuring that they are able to bridge this lacuna as indicated in the budget as quickly as possible, so that we may not have much liquidity challenges as a government, and also not suffocating the economy going forward.
But I mean, if you take a look at the 2025 budget, I mean, at least for the rest of the year, appropriation is almost 300 billion. There's already deficits in there. Now we are so locked out of the international market, which means that internally generated revenue appears to be our only option in terms of meeting our aspirations as a country. Now, with these taxes have gone up. Looking at the budget itself, are you certain that government can stay on track? Government plans to deal with the shortfall will work, especially when in a country, tax payments and other issues continue to be a major challenge confronting the ordinary Ghanaian?
Within the short-term period, my view is that they may have some challenges, but within the medium-term perspective, as long as the long-term perspective, they are able to roll out the policies as outlined in the budget consistently into the subsequent budget, and putting in the mechanisms to ensure that they block the loopholes and they educate the citizens and the business community to be able to comply with their tax obligation. Then my view is that they will be able to, to a larger degree, bridge that particular gap created, the shortfall instead of the domestic revenue generation. But let me also add that we started gathering that government will be resorting to the domestic bond market. Probably that's a signal. Of course, the capital market will be very difficult for government in terms of our high debt stock and our relationship with the external creditors as for now to know may be too good. And government wanted to resort to the domestic bond market to borrow more. And that is to tell you that in terms of the deficit within the budget is quite huge, but I'm very optimistic, and that the policies outlined within the budget, the government is able to religiously work towards it. Within the medium-term perspective, they should be able to narrow the deficit in terms of the domestic revenue generation and be able to implement and execute some of the policies outlined in the fiscal budget.
How soon do you expect these changes to take effect?
Oh, as soon as what I know, my little knowledge in law, once the government has, the president, His Excellency has, signed, appended, it becomes a law. It ceases to be a bill. So technically, it takes immediate effect. But we all know that there are operational and technical issues. Okay, probably it may take some few weeks or a month or some few months for them to be able to readjust their system. We are dealing with technology here. We are dealing with systems here, and that may take a little bit of time. But today, that His Excellency has appended the signature, it's a law, and technically by law, what it means is that it takes immediate effect. And that is my understanding of the law in terms of president appending their signature to a bill and becoming a law.
But I mean, the other matter, and I mean, I'm just looking at it as a Ghanaian, and I'm wondering whether I'm being given a false hope in the sense that here we are as a country, we are still under an IMF program. We've postponed most of our debts. Some will mature from 2026 and the likes, which means that we've got a tall mountain to overcome in the next few years to come. Yes, there's a new government in town that is giving me this hope of a better tomorrow. Yet fundamentally, nothing has changed.
Yes, I must also admit, look, I've said it over and over, both on a local platform as well as on an international platform, but that it takes time for any economic policy to yield the necessary result. And it is against that background that I have, let me use the word, caution the government that they need to manage the expectation of Ghanaians, and they need to manage the goodwill that they are enjoying. They shouldn't create the impression that they have what it takes to significantly change the structure of our economy, to significantly improve the living standard of Ghanaians. Okay, they need to communicate in the manner that, yes, there's a huge tax. They have what it takes to be able to systematically improve the living condition of Ghanaians. But if the communication is that they are in power and they have what it takes to significantly change the economy, that may tend back to hunt them. Because as it stands now, looking at the economic fundamentals, recently the Bank of Ghana has even increased the policy rate to 28%. What it means that the cost of capital is going to increase, and that may have a ripple effect across the board.
And even today, inflation is even going up even today.
Certainly so. So these are the indicators to tell you that things may not ease immediately. So they need to manage the communication, and they need to assure the good people of Ghana that, yes, there are some issues that ought to be addressed, but we're working towards it, and no economic policy that is outlined within the fiscal budget 2025 will yield that result that will bring about any significant improvement. It takes time. So my only advice to the government is that they need to manage this space very well in terms of communication, the way they carry themselves in the eyes of the general public, so that they do not end up, quote and unquote, Ghanaians describing them as liars. All
right, we'll leave it here for now, Dr. Prempeh. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We've been trying to reach out to the telecom chamber. They are unable to speak to this matter for now. But the news, if you are just tuning in to Joy News, this is the pulse. President John Mahama has signed off on the repealed E-levy, the emission tax, and of course the betting tax. He's also given his assent to the gold board bill that was passed by Parliament, now a law. What is left is for the Ghana Revenue Authority, the Telecommunication Chamber, and the other relevant bodies connected to this matter to now fine-tune their machines to ensure that if you are sending Momo today, that percentage you pay to government will no longer affect you. And that is the next stage before implementation will take place. So don't go and fight your merchant saying that, I mean, why are you taking this percentage when President Mahama has signed off to it? That has yet to take full effect. That is the news this afternoon. Again, this afternoon, government is pushing forward with its plans to reintroduce private entities into Ghana's power distribution sector. Despite strong opposition from the Trade Union Congress and the Public Utilities Workers Union, after nearly 2 months of deliberation, the technical committee tasked with exploring private sector participation in the Electricity Company of Ghana, and NETCO has submitted the reports to the Energy Minister. One of the key proposals in the report suggests breaking ECG's operations into separate units and allowing private sector to take over specific segments. This is just one of 3 major recommendations presented to government. My colleague, Michael Ashale, was present at the submission and now joins me in studio with details on the proposal. So, Michael, let's start with the 3 issues that came up for discussion this afternoon.
Okay, so, Alton, there were 3 recommendations. The committee prefers to say modules, that is, how they foresee government can introduce private sectors into the game. But this was only advised based on the findings, on the challenges, the true challenges they think is bedeviling the ECG in particular. Now, they said that they identified 9 major challenges. Now, in the first group of challenges, they saw administrative setup. They thought that the administrative setup of ECG was problematic. They also thought that the governance and procurement practices at ECG and some of the power distribution companies was also a problem that possibly has brought us to where we are to have a conversation about this. Also, the operational issues, including high losses on the part of ECG. Now, this they separated into 2. The collection aspect, the losses from the collection, and then also the losses in terms of power losses. And then finally, they also saw that there was widespread customer dissatisfaction. This particular one possibly may have influenced one of the modules that they also came to. So having known these challenges wrong with ECG, they came up with 3 recommendations or 3 modules that they thought that the government could look at this.
Right.
Now, one of the modules was the entity concession, which they explained that this will be to have something of sort like the PDS model, to have the whole ECG possibly given to one entity that will manage the entire value chain.
The entire electricity company of Ghana.
Yes, that's one of the...
Not just the revenue collection.
Not just the revenue collection. This
the
is
entire operations.
Everything about ECG, provided ECG signs off on that operation, that entity will have to take over that. That's one of the recommendations they put at entity concession. And they also had a second one, a multiple lease agreement. And this, they say, that will involve the actions of the ECG or operations of the ECG will be broken down into separate parts, and then these parts will be separately given to different private sector players to take over. So you still have, say, your ECG, but if it possibly comes to billing, if it comes to metering, if it comes to interface with customers, you have different private entities in that space. And then there was a final one. And this clearly you see that this is based on their problem or the challenge they saw with the ECG, the widespread customer dissatisfaction. The final one is that to have private sectors interface directly with the customers in that situation. So that is what they call the service franchise. So when it comes to service to the customer, it will be a sole private entity that would have taken over that particular business.
And you spoke to the energy minister or the person in charge of this?
Yeah, so the chairman, who is also formerly used to be at Repeal Power, spoke to us when he was presenting his statement to the minister. This is the person of Jabesh Emisa Arta. We can listen to him whilst he was making this, giving these recommendations to the minister, explaining into detail the challenges and again what those challenges, how they can be cured.
Identified 9 major challenges that are impeding the performance of distribution utilities in the country. And these 9 have been put in 4 groups. The first group has to do with the administrative setup of ECG especially. And we see problems with governance, we see problems with management malaise. And then we also see procurement problems. This is not because of what has come up in the past week, but we had identified it previously. Apart from these, then there are also operational issues that are impeding the performance of this distribution function. And these include the high losses, both in terms of commercial and collection, and high losses in terms of technical and unaccounted energy. Then lastly, there's widespread customer dissatisfaction with the services they are receiving from the distribution utilities. Overall, we looked about eight models of private sector participation, and we settled on 3 to that summarize what the picture is. And we have looked at this in detail. There's one that we call, the first one, option A, that we call the entity concession, where the whole distribution business would be given out to a private concession as one whole concession. Then there's option B, which we are calling the multiple lease, in which case the distribution across the country will be divided into several parts, and each of them awarded to probably a different private sector participator to operate and to invest in. Then there's a third option, which we call option C, the service franchise, in which case the private sector will operate the network, the low voltage network from the distribution transformer to deliver services to the homes.
Right, so that's Jabez Amisa Arthur, that he led this committee to put together this this work, and then they presented it to the minister. And the minister's response was what?
Well, the minister at least gives us an indication what is going to happen next. Now, he tells us that he has to now put together a position paper and then send that to cabinet, where some more deliberations will happen. Now, these are 3 modules of recommendations, and government may have to choose one or possibly mix some of these recommendations into a module that they may prefer. So this position people have to go, but the minister also tells us that they have to find 2 consultants at least. One has to do with the project consultant, and then another to further work on this, because they need to put money to how much this will actually cost government again, whether it will be a viable business. I think the committee did part of it, but the minister tells us that these 2 things also have to be done, and possibly take some time before these things are done. We can listen to him interacting with the media right after he received these recommendations from the committee.
Exercise is not the end of the road. In fact, this is the beginning. Because we thought that before we undertake or pursue this step, we needed to consult broadly. And so this is exactly what the committee has done. And as you've just heard from the chairman, they've given us 3 options. Option 1, option 2, option 3. And in all the 3 options, it's quite clear that none of them talks about outright sale of ECG and its assets. And so I just thought that I should make it clear so that nobody goes to misquote us or misrepresent us to say that the committee has recommended that ECG be sold. In all the suggestions and the options, it's quite obvious that ECG will still remain the asset owner. And then, depending on which one we choose, we'll make progress. The next step from here will be to do a position paper to cabinet for the entire government to consider and approve the option that we will be pursuing, following which we would establish a project implementation committee. We would also have to get a transaction advisor, make this process as transparent and open as possible, with emphasis on local content and participation. On a monthly basis, we incur a deficit or a shortfall of more than 1 billion cedis from the distribution sector, and that has a cascading effect on the rest of the power sector players. And so clearly, something must be done.
So we're going to explore the recommendations further, because the chairman of the technical committee that put together this work, Mr. Jabez Amisa Arthur, joins me, as well as the General Secretary of the Public Utilities Workers Union, Timothy Nyame. But before we do that, let me quickly find out from Papa, also at the ministry, you try to find out from the minister the status of the ECG containers. Over the weekend, he told us that they've recovered 200 of them. What is the status of the containers as they look for it?
So I put that figure directly to him, whether we have recovered more. He says that his answer is that they have to consolidate, and that's a word that he keeps coming back to, that he has to go back to all the security agencies that they've been doing this exercise with to consolidate the numbers, and in due time, and he says that will not take some time, they will come back to the public and update us on where exactly they have got into. But he reiterated that the Attorney General, together with some other security agencies, have been tasked or directed to take action against some of the individuals.
The NIB and the Attorney General.
And the Attorney General have been asked to take action against some of the individuals that they have arrested, apprehended so far. All
right. Thank you so much, Papa Nim, for Michael Rasheli, for that report. Let me go on Zoom. Mr. Jabez and Mr. Arthur joins me. Mr. Arthur, it's a pleasure to have you here. Good afternoon, sir, and welcome to the Pulse.
And good afternoon to your listeners.
Great. And just when we thought that you were out of public service, they dragged you back into it.
Yeah, so that is, I guess, a little contribution we can make to the nation.
Great. So having had a look at ECG as a state entity and coming up with these recommendations, what did you uncover? Is ECG such a hopeless entity, or there is still hope for a better tomorrow for ECG?
Well, that is a very loaded question because it depends on what we as a country are willing to do and force them to do, and how disciplined we ourselves are also going to be. We found that most of the governance and management malaise and problems the management of ECG are accepting influence from outside and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. So whether we as a people want to stop this kind of what people normally refer to as undue influence from outside, and whether the managers themselves will also manage the entity as it should be, as a mandate from the people and a service to the people, is what I found surprising, and a question that we have to answer as to how to go forward. But if it is also true that after how many years we still cannot keep our hands off the utility, and then the only way to give the utility professional independence to do what they should do is to bring in private participation, then if that's what we select as a country, then I guess that's what we will have.
But this influence that you speak of, is it political influence?
I wouldn't call it political. Some of it is not actually political. It's self-interest and all this kind of thing. So it is not just political people. It's business people. It's people who have something to sell, something to offer, and everybody pulling weight and rank to get it done, and that kind of thing. So it goes beyond mere political influence. A lot of it is business influence and so on.
Your first recommendation, yes, please go on.
Sorry, and of course, self-interest is also, you can see that as well.
Your first recommendation to government is for, 100% takeover of ECG. Why did you come to such a conclusion?
It's not a conclusion. It's an option. It's an option,
right?
And we do throw light on the strengths and weakness of this, and the pros and cons of that option. We have to decide how we want to go forward. As I've said, it will address some of the challenges we see well. It won't address some well. It will serve our interest in one way. It may not serve so well our sovereign interest, how you go about these things. And so it's a trade-off that we are pointing out, that is one way you can go. If you go this way, these are the implications and these are the impacts. If you go the other way, these are the impacts, and it's up to us to balance what we want to do.
So for the first recommendation, 100% takeover, is it your suggestion that it should be sold outright to a private entity so that it goes off the hands of government?
No, it's not. It's not selling out. Although many people would take issue with making that distinction, but the fact is that you don't sell it; you give it to somebody to operate. So should I try this analogy? Let me try this analogy.
Yes, please do.
You have a taxi, and you get a driver to drive the taxi, but you haven't sold the taxi. So he's driving the taxi for you, offering services to the clients for you. So it's not a sale.
But Mr. Arthur, you have managed a power entity before, We Power. And so I can put you in the seat of ECG and to say that putting yourself at the helm of affairs of the ECG and coming up with this recommendation. ECG, from what we've been told, they have the best of engineers. The infrastructure is there. But over the years, they have failed to live up to expectation. if I should put you in the seat of the ECG, what would you say are the key issues if we are not to have it 100% takeover?
There are operational issues, and there are operational issues that must be addressed. There's no way a business incurring that much loss can survive. It cannot survive. The loss levels they are incurring, there's no way you can provide. I mean, I've used the example with some people I'm speaking with. If you are a distributor and you are distributing beer and you send a truckload of beer to go to the Western region,
right?
You follow it and track where it has dropped every crate, every carton. And then you expect people to pay for the carton it dropped off at Mankisim, the carton it dropped off at Salpon, and so on. As it's going and it's dropping the cartons, you track it. And then you make sure that the Salpon people pay for the amount, the number of cartons they drop there. So you have to do those things if you are a distributor. And it's the same thing with the electricity. You can't send electricity to the West and then not know how much of it was dropped at various places, and then so on. So there are operational issues that have to be solved. And yes, you are right. It pains me as a technical professional trained in Ghana that we can't seem to manage our distribution well. It pains me because I see that we can do it. We as Ghanaians, we can do it. But the fact is that over 30 years plus, we have not been able to do it, and every effort has failed. We looked at private sector models starting from 1994, and we are looking at 8 of them, and they have all come to nothing. And so it's painful for me as a professional.
I mean,
that we can't show that we can manage this thing well.
The last time we were updated on the figures, the finance minister told us that power sold by ECG, and they are able to only recover 64% of it, meaning that over 30% of it they cannot account for. And that's a drain on the company resources and, of course, a drain on government revenue. But can ECG wholly be blamed for the challenges it is going through?
Yes, and we are all to blame as well. But they are at the forefront. And that's what I'll say. You can't have a company losing 30% of the beer you are selling and then expect to survive. You can't lose 30% of your product and go from year to year and hope to survive. It doesn't work that way. So the fact is that things can't remain like this. It has to change. And either we, whatever is causing it, it has to change. One, the managers have to manage better, and this influence that is also bringing about procurement issues, they themselves, the management incompetence that is bringing about all of that has to be solved. And we have to make a determined effort as Ghanaians. Either we are solving it one way or another. Either we are solving it by dealing with management and letting management set up and do what it has to do, and the staff also do what they have to do. And if we have to take our hands off, that is part of the challenge. We have to do that. But if we are not willing to do those things, then the only choice is to bring in somebody else.
Final question. Your second recommendation is something that we've seen before. I mean, the introduction of some private sector participation in the operations of the ECG. PDS was contracted to do a similar thing, but for some reasons, the SWLBB administration decided to abrogate that particular contract. You are recommending that it could be an option that government can exploit. This time, how should it be done as far as your recommendation is concerned?
Well, for each of the 3 options that we have talked about, we have given advice as to what has to be improved about each of them to make them as well as they. And let me say, from 1994 up to now, we looked at 8 PSC models that ECG has tried, 8 of them. And we are recommending that whichever of the 3 that we are focused on, we have advised us to, if you want to do this, These are the things you have to focus on. These
Right.
are you have to improve. So if you want to even repeat PDS and the nation to repeat PDS, we have advised that these are the things that didn't work well in the first one. So if you want to repeat it, you have to address that. The second model is also something that has been tried before, and we give advice on how that can be made better and made to work. The third one is also something that has been tried before. It was a model that was similar to what ECG had tried with a company called BX.
Right.
I understand it was at Keshi or Nungwa somewhere there. So they had tried that and they didn't allow it to finish. So each of these things they've tried before. It's not just PDS. They've tried all the other things. We have given advice on the trade-offs, the pros and cons of each, and what you lose when you choose one over the other, and how to make each one as best as it can be.
All right. Let's leave it here for now, and we'll follow through with what government will settle on. Mr. Jabir Mr. Atta is chairman of the technical committee that government tasked to recommend what to do with Electricity Company of Ghana going forward, and they've come up with 3 recommendations. Now, let me bring in Timothy Nyame from the Public Utilities Workers Union. Mr. Nyame, you're welcome to the pulse. And if you can kindly unmute for me, Mr. Nyame.
Warm greetings to your listeners and viewers, bro.
Great to have you. So I'm absolutely certain that from the union's perspective, you are not happy with the fact that ECG is always in the news, and sometimes for the very wrong reasons.
Definitely not happy at all.
And you've heard the committee that was taxed by government. Is it a case that ECG is such a worthless, public institution? Everybody appears to be throwing mud at it.
Well, it's not as we all think. ECG is actually not worse as we are all thinking. But at times you actually, at times you face challenging times, and I'm sure these are the challenging times ECG is going through. And it is not new, these challenges are not new to Public Utilities Workers Union. They are issues that we're dealing with the top management. And I thank God that today it has come up, and then we will definitely, overcome.
Right. This technical committee that was tasked by the energy minister, they presented their report today, wondering if the union was consulted on the task that they were given.
Thank you very much. The ministerial committee formed by Honorable Minister, who were actually notified, which TUC and PU together were invited. We presented our position paper. Later on, we were engaged. So as time went on, we were also invited on a Zoom meeting. And I don't know whether the chairman is still online. After the presentation online, we demanded their document because, of course, the union sent hard copies of the document or presentation, either soft or in any way, which the chairman promised to give to the union. And we have been following. This is about the 3rd week running, only for me to hear that they are going to present their position to the Honorable Minister. We were not involved in that process.
So you were not given a copy of their work?
We were not given a copy. Though the promise given us, well, it couldn't come.
All right. But this afternoon, they are telling us that they've made 3 recommendations to government, 3 models that government can choose from. The minister says that you will have to write a position paper on it and present to cabinet or the president. Now, one is 100% takeover of operations of ECG. The other one is partial or some aspects of ECG to be allowed by the private sector to play active roles in it. And also what they call service franchise, where the private sector will have some kind of an interface with customers of the ECG. What do you make of these 3 scenarios that they've painted and asking government to settle on one of them?
Thank you very much. In fact, we need to obtain the document and study it very well before we make our position. But you rightly asking the question whether ECG doesn't have the capacity to do what they want the private sector or the so-called concessionaires to do. And it is something that we stated in our opposition paper, what we think government should do that can sustain ECG and turn ECG around. So, and we thought that after their presentation, to give us a document for us to review and actually state our position again, looking at what they have, the issue that they have gathered. But they have not been able to do that. So for now, we in our presentation, our statement, position paper, we made it clear that for TUC and POO, private sector participation and privatization are one and the same.
Right.
So nobody will invest in a utility entity that is not supposed to make profit and will not make profit. No investor, unless they come and sign a declaration that they are coming as an NGO or non-profit making entity. So there are modalities that are supposed to be put in place, which we suggest to government that when that is done, for instance, they are saying they are going to give the whole option one, for instance, option one. What is the difference between option one and what POO presented or TUC presented to government? But we identify a series of issues that government need to look at. You also made mention of the revenue shortfall. And when you have an entity that does not have adequate meters to meter customers, and of course, the chairman is an engineer who also knows that there are transmission losses. So when you are transmitting power from one area to the other, there are losses. And then you don't have adequate meters or appropriate meters for replacement for new customers. You are definitely, we definitely encounter such problems. So let's look at it holistically. Look, I say POO stand for to benefit, or the intention of POO or the position of POO stand to benefit Ghanaians. It's not that you are looking for our own parochial interest at all. I want to state it clear, categorically that look, there's no private sector participation in the energy sector that is not supposed to make profit. They don't have any business in the private sector, in the public sector. They should put certain modalities in place and let us move together. You understand?
Right.
When those things are put, everything will be right. We have engineers who are capable. Once you are able to give them assignment and monitor that they deliver, you fire those who are supposed to be fired. You commend those who are supposed to commend it, so that the energy sector or ECG will be seen to be on its toes. So, look, customer dissatisfaction. What is the cause? Is it the cause of the workers? Is it the cause of it is the cause of top management that is put in place, so that they are not focused on delivering reliable power to customers. So that dissatisfaction does not mean that you should dispose the entity that is supposed to deliver services to citizens of Ghana.
So Mr. Nyame, from the union's perspective, is the issue about incompetence on the management of ECG? Is it about interference, external interference, or really what?
My brother, we actually sent our position paper to the press. The position paper presented by TUC and POO that we sent to the chairman of the committee was sent to the press, which we outlined a whole lot of issues. Government interference, procurement, and lack of adequate meters, repairs and maintenance shortfalls, and so forth and so on. Of course, we also mentioned about the pricing of the IPPs, which is in dollar terms. We request, and we gave all alternatives what you should look at. And no, when we look at that, when we do that, and everybody who is assigned a job should be monitored, should be supervised to make sure that he delivers. If you don't deliver, they should sign they should sign performance contract with government, so that they will be able to deliver. When they don't deliver, they are fired. So what is the business of a private sector in the energy sector? Unless you are saying that we are changing the dynamic, that look, you should come and make profit. So these are some of the things that we want to state.
My final question then, because this matter is now going to go to the president or the presidency, for some kind of action before the energy minister will announce the future management of the electricity company of Ghana. You obviously, you've taken up, you have your position already, but on the flip side, there's a matter of this ECG that's been in the news since day one, the Mason containers, and the blame here and there. First, let me ask off briefly before I let you go. The unions, how the union is observing this Mason container, scandal.
Thank you very much. We have issued a press statement, just issued a press statement today, urging the ministry to actually follow the issues logically and bring perpetrators to book. Because these issues are not new. We have been meeting top management on this issue, containers procurement and containers at the port. And we gave them option, procurement option, that look, you place an order for an item, you should make it in such a way that item should be delivered to your preferred location before the contract is completed. You don't order something and come and leave it at the port, and it is at the port attracting demurrage. Another one is being procured. So, my brother, these are issues, and our standing joint negotiation committee meeting with management, we have time and again highlighted the issue to the attention of management. So, look, see, these are not new. We're actually never surprised. The only thing we are surprised of is where the containers are being sent and then recycled into another. That is another matter. But we are aware, and we have raised concern over all these things. These are some of the things that we actually highlighted to the attention of Honorable Minister. We're going to look at. We are not asking something that is abstract. We are asking something that is doable. So we look at the nation. We should look at the nation and also see how best we can be able to manage this entity, so that we are seen to be moving in the right direction.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Timothy Nyame is the Secretary of the Public Utilities Workers Union Pool, and the matter is about a technical committee that was set up by the Energy Minister to advise on the way forward for the management of the electricity company of Ghana, and they've presented recommendations to government. 3 of them government can decide which one to go with. 100% takeover of ECG's management, some aspect of ECG management being given to the private sector, and of course, what they call service franchise, where the customer relation aspect of ECG can be given to somebody to handle. Then also is a matter of the Mason containers. That has a last count, 1,300 containers belonging to the Electricity Company of Ghana cannot be accounted for, running into over $600 million US. The minister says that they have recovered 200, and that an update, a formal request has been made to the Attorney General, Minister of Justice, and the National Investigation Bureau to take over investigation into this matter. 14 individuals have been arrested, including 10 Chinese, some Indians, and some Ghanaians who were, found with the containers belonging to the ECG. We are keeping an eye on this matter, and we'll bring you more in subsequent bulletins. This is a pause here on Jordan. We'll take a short. When we return, she's the only lady among 4 gentlemen vying for the presidency of the African Development Bank. This afternoon, my guest is Swazi Shabalala, a South African, and she's here with me as we delve into why she wants to be the head of the African Development Bank. Stay right there. When we return, we'll have that conversation. You're welcome back, and of course, we're going to have our next conversation. Now, she's the only lady among 4 gentlemen vying for the presidency of the Africa Development Bank. Bajabulile Swazi Chabalala is a South African business executive and former senior vice president of the Africa Development Bank, who is now a candidate for the AFDB presidency, having resigned from her previous role to focus on her campaign. Chabalala has had over 30 years of experience in management, finance, and risk management, with a background in both the public and private sector. This afternoon, she joins me in the studio to discuss her chances ahead of the Africa Development Bank elections. And you're welcome.
Thank you.
As you can see, I've been doing rehearsal since morning when I got word that you'll be coming on the show, especially the first name. And Majabulele. Swazi Shabala, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
I have a soft spot for South Africans. I've been in South Africa a couple of times.
Okay.
I've been to Durban. I enjoyed the walk on the beach.
Yep.
And of course, I've been to Johannesburg as well. It's a beautiful country. Yep. And so it's good to see you here.
It's good to be here. I love Ghana. I came here for the first time in 1999.
1999, right.
So I have been here many times as well. Also, the opportunity of being in Cote d'Ivoire, in Abidjan.
I see.
Meant that is a 45-minute flight.
Of course.
To Accra anytime I feel like it.
And so you are familiar with the weather?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I know it very well. The culture as well, which also shares some similarities.
Right.
With Cote d'Ivoire.
So the Africa Development Bank, you are not new to the Africa Development Bank. You've had senior positions, and now you want to elevate you to the very top. Why?
Well, I mean, I think that as a continent, we are at an inflection point. We're waiting later on today to hear what happens, what announcements come out of Washington, D.C. But also, I think over the last 15 years or so, we've seen a decline in overseas development assistance.
Right.
Which is what, Africa has relied on for many decades for development. And really what I'm interested in is to really see if we can position the African Development Bank to think differently about development finance. Very
important. I mean, more especially, even today as we speak, the U.S. ambassador to Ghana is expected to formally say that the U.S. aid business has virtually come to an end. Ghana was expecting some $70 million from U.S. aid assisting programs, which means that it will not happen.
Yeah.
And so time to look inward now becomes very important, especially for Africans. And I'm seeing that is one of your main pillars.
Absolutely. I think that, first of all, I think our challenges, are many, as you well know. But I do think that we've had a sort of persistent problem for many decades, which is really that we are not able to address the infrastructure gaps in Africa. And of course, I think if you look at our ability to be productive, our ability, for instance, to make operational the Africa Continental Agreement, depend on this basic infrastructure. And we've started to look at it, see the work being done by the World Bank and the African Development Bank Mission 300 to close the electricity gap. But I think that, overall, we need to now start thinking differently about these and also mobilizing and working with the private sector to actually close that gap.
And how do you hope to go about this?
So in my vision for the bank, I have 3 pillars, which I intended to lift Africa. So focusing on large transformational infrastructure for the continent, and then doing so in partnership with the private sector, but also supporting private sector development. But I'm very mindful that private sector development depends on reliable electricity, roads and rail that work, ports that are functional, and of course a business environment which allows the private sector to thrive. And then the third pillar of my vision is to actually focus the African Development Bank a lot more closely on infrastructure, including digital infrastructure, which is so vital for our future, and also so vital for closing some of the other gaps that we don't talk about around health outcomes, for instance, and education.
Right. You spoke about energy. You know that electricity is quite key in terms of how we want to, for industry, for personal use, even if we want to really develop, it is a major tool that we need to have it in abundance. South Africa, you've had your own challenges with electricity supply. Nigeria, the same. We're just discussing about our own situation here in Ghana. I understand that the dam or the hydro potential in Congo, if harnessed well, is even able to power the whole of the continent. I'm wondering how you intend to make energy a key driver for trade and investment in Africa under your leadership at the AFD.
Absolutely. I talked about productivity, and growth depends on productivity. If you're not a productive country or continent, you will not grow. And for me, all of these discussions on many different areas, even including debt, is really, if you think about the debt to GDP ratio, if you grow your GDP, you start to address some of the debt challenges. And at the heart of the infrastructure we need is electricity.
True.
Without electricity, a digital continent and a digital future for the continent is not possible. So for me, there are major projects that have been talked about for decades now. And it's really, I think that, I was listening to Dr. Ngozi the other day, Director General of the
World Trade Center, the World Trade Organization.
Exactly. And she was talking about the fact that the way we should look at all of these geopolitical changes, we should see them as an opportunity. It's an opportunity for Africa to finally look inward for solutions for its problems. So I think that, in terms of electricity, we have this persistent gap of 600 million. If you look at the potential of the hydro of Inga, Grand Inga, they talk about it, it's massive.
True.
And then if you look at the hydro potential actually of many other countries in the continent that haven't been tapped, nobody talks about them. And if you look at the potential of linking that hydro potential to actually power Africa, it's fantastic.
So the potential is there.
Massive.
It's about the investment to make it a reality.
Actually, I want to challenge that a little.
Okay.
Because, I always say that money is always available for a good project.
Right.
And really here, the issue is, and some of the issues that you had in your segment before this, around the capacity to be able to develop and to maintain electricity generation, transmission, and distribution sustainably. So for this to happen, it needs more than just money. In fact, I would argue that what's more important is a reform of the sector.
Great.
Number one. And secondly, I think that, related to that is really making it possible for the private sector to bring financing and skills into the sector. We address those issues, the money will come.
The money will come.
You remember, if you build it,
of course, of course. Let's look at the other issue. After COVID, a lot of economies, including Ghana, went down. We had to go to the IMF, and we're still under an IMF program in Ghana. I can speak same for other African countries, Egypt and the like. So I asked myself, can the African Development Bank replace the assistance we go to get from the IMF and the World Bank? Can the African Development Bank play that role, especially for countries on the continent? Is it not possible?
So really, you must remember that each of these organizations have a mandate. And the mandate of the African Development Bank, as directed by the shareholders of the bank, which includes Ghana, does not include that kind of support and intervention. But of course, the shareholders can have a discussion about, whether the mandate of the African Development Bank can change.
Yes.
But I really want to argue strongly that if we don't fix the fundamental issues, even if the African Development Bank becomes mandated to help
we'll still have the same challenge.
We'll have it again.
So how
another crisis, and we'll have exactly the same.
So how do we fix these fundamental challenges?
And that's what I'm saying, that if you don't address the infrastructure issues, if you think about the talented entrepreneurs throughout this continent, who are doing everything to run businesses, to grow businesses, but struggle with intermittent power, for instance. They cannot be as productive and therefore as competitive as their peers in other regions. If you don't fix that, you really are, stifling the ability of the private sector to take us out of all of this. If you don't have digital infrastructure, somebody was telling me, for instance, we have about 1 million kilometers of fiber optic. Europe, tiny as it is, it can fit into a corner of Africa, is about 15 million kilometers of fiber optic. For me, these are the basics. These are the basics. And I always argue that Africa doesn't need new strategies, doesn't need new plans. Agenda 2063 has been there for a very long time. We know what needs to be done. And my argument is that, can we get on with it finally?
And you want to lead this revolution?
Absolutely.
And how do you also position after the African trade area to play this role in terms of enhancing trade among, member countries, ensuring there's free movement. Some African countries, including South Africa, they've waived visa for a lot of countries, meaning that a lot more people can now have movement within the continent. But it is still a restricted area in some of the countries. After headquarters is in Ghana, it's been some few years since it came into fruition. Are we getting enough from after?
So, to be honest, the question will probably be better answered by my colleague Wamgele, the head of the Africa AfTA Secretariat. But I do want to say that the ambitions are right, and I think we were right to ratify that agreement. What I think we didn't think about enough was how do we go from that agreement to operationalizing the agreement. And I think that there have been efforts, and maybe there was a belief, in fact, that the regional economic communities were functioning at a higher level than perhaps they were. And because, of course, if you have all of the regional economic communities functioning, it's much easier to then create a continental, I spent some time with business people last night from Ghana, and they were saying that the ECOWAS free trade area, for instance, has got many, many challenges. So I do think that that's one area, but also if you don't have the free movement of people as well, it makes it very difficult. True. If you don't have enough infrastructure, it makes it very difficult. So poor roads, and say poor management of people, traffic, the ability to fly from one part of the continent to the other. That's the basic infrastructure which is also necessary. However, I am optimistic that maybe taking a different approach, which is a region by region approach, which then builds up to a continental approach, we can get there, but we really need to address the basics, including setting the same standards. If you look at, again, a small operator in Ghana trying to export to different countries, if they are dealing with different standards, how are they supposed to do that?
It will be difficult.
Exactly.
It will be difficult.
Because the trade can be as free as you like, but it's really these sort of non-tariff barriers. There's many of them. And, trying to address them for the continent as a whole is going to be difficult. But if you do so region per region, with the idea that let the regions each look at their standards, and then it's much easier when you're looking at 5-6 regions to say, how do we then harmonize standards so that business on the continent is comfortable that if I make my product like this, I can sell it anywhere on the continent.
I just want to find out what your leadership will seek to do in these areas. For example, this is a continent with over 1.3 billion people, home to 30% of the world's natural resources, has a youthful population, meaning the potential is there for us to grow and then attract whatever investments that we can attract. Is the bank positioned to, tap into all of these?
So the bank has got a lot of talented people, it's got a lot of capacity, it's got a lot of capital, it's got a AAA rating, so it's got a lot going for it. But I think that over the last, say, 15 years, more and more what we've seen is that, the bank has tended to disperse its efforts and therefore reduce its impact.
Right.
And what I would really like to, what I think I bring to the table in the context of my vision is that ability to really have the bank be more focused, be more selective. Because even though the bank has got a lot of resources, the fact of the matter is that the bank cannot respond to every challenge. Because people don't realize that, we have a capacity which was built over the 60 years of the bank's life, really focused on infrastructure, which was the original mandate from the old Organization of African Unity. And I think that if you look at the ability of infrastructure to help Africa leapfrog, because we don't have time to do things the old-fashioned way.
At all.
We have to leapfrog. So, if, for instance, if you look at our approach to education, if we are going to build schools everywhere so that every child has access to education, we could be doing this for the next 100 years. But if we digitize and make sure that Africans have access to the internet, all of a sudden, there's a technical solution to actually reaching kids and training them and developing them and giving them skills.
So you think this is the time for women to lead? I mean, I'm looking at few exciting examples. Namibia cabinet is made up of more women. You have a woman president, Madam Ngozi, World Trade Organization. Even our own Shelia Yokoboche, now the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Organization. You hopefully becoming the president of the African Development Bank. Is women's time, right?
It's always been women's time. And women have led for a very long time.
You are coming up against 4 men. How do you assess your chances?
I mean, I respect all of them. I know all of them, you know, but I do think that I have certain advantages.
Okay.
First of all, in my 30 years of experience, I've worked in the private sector, I've worked in the public sector, and I've worked in development finance. You know, I think that allows me to approach development problems differently and more innovatively. For instance, you may not know this, but you know, African Development Bank was the first institution to issue a hybrid bond. And I'm the person within the African Development Bank that said that, well, why aren't we thinking about our capital structure differently? And now all of the MDBs are talking about introducing hybrid capital into their capital structure. So I think I bring that advantage, the fact that I'm not a lifetime or a lifer in development, and therefore I've had the opportunity to look at all of these problems from different angles. I've worked in Africa my entire career, so I understand the issues, and also having worked with the private sector, having worked with other development institutions from the private sector point of view, I also think that I'm the woman, if you like, that can bring together all of that firepower and muscle, which Africa has.
We need that. We need that. So whilst in Ghana, you hope to meet with government officials. I'm thinking that this is part of the lobbying process.
Yes, it is. It's part of the campaign. So I'm actually here with the Ms. Ayanda Dodlo, who is the President Ramaphosa's special envoy. And I'm here with her because President Ramaphosa has written a letter to President Mahama and sent the special envoy to, of course, request his support for South Africa's candidacy. Because people don't realize, in fact, that you don't yourself look at, there's no advertisement, you know, for this position in that sense. The member countries of the bank are asked to provide, to nominate people that they think can lead the bank. And I was nominated by the government of South Africa. And of course, the president is making sure, the president of South Africa is making sure that through the special envoy, he is talking to his counterparts.
For support.
For support.
And we are solidly behind you, hoping that you will win.
Thank you so much.
So your final words as we take leave of us.
Thank you very much. I think that it's Africa's time. I firmly believe that our future is bright, and it's really a question of us working together as Africans, not worrying, you know, too much about what the world can do for us, and really focusing on putting our power together, our resources, our skills, really smart people in the continent, and really leveraging this opportunity for the future of Africa. And you know, I think I'm the woman to at least lead the African Development Bank in that partnership with countries, with other development institutions and the private sector.
Thank you so much for coming through this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
And of course, Madam Bajabulele Chabalala is bidding to lead the Africa Development Bank as its president in the upcoming election. And she came to share her vision with us. Let's take a short break. When we return, the Veterinary Services Directorate of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture has dismissed claims of an active African swine fever outbreak in Ghana. We have details for you when we return. Right, we're back. This is The Pulse. Now, let's turn our attention to some other stories making news this afternoon. The Veterinary Services Directorate of the Ministry of Agriculture has dismissed claims of active African swine fever outbreak in Ghana. According to the Directorate, reports of outbreak in Damango in the Savannah region and Kwa West in the Eastern region have been contained. Join us for more on this, Dr. Benjamin Kisi-Sasu, Risk Communication Officer at the Veterinary Services Directorate. Dr. Sasu, so is there an outbreak?
So currently, no, there's no outbreak as we stand right now. Though African swine fever is endemic in Ghana, like the way when it comes to human side cholera, we do get cases every year. This year, we've had a first case in January in Greater Accra, and we have also had a case in February this year in the Eastern region. That was the one that was recorded in Peru, a farm place. Anytime we get these cases, we try to contain as veterinary services, as we already know that Ghana is endemic for it. Just to allay the fears of the public, African swine fever doesn't affect humans. It's a disease of economic importance, which means that if anyone puts investment into pig production and they are hit by this virus or this disease, they are assured of losing almost 100% of all their stock. So we try to contain it so that other farms nearby will not have these diseases. Just to also let the public know and the various agencies in the media space to understand that whenever there's an outbreak or an alert of any animal disease, the Minister of Food and Agriculture, with the advice, upon advice of the Chief Veterinary Officer, will quickly issue out a communique or inform the public. As it stands now, there is no any case. Yesterday, upon that report, we quickly trigger our internal processes to check again, and we realize that no mortality, no sick animals is ongoing at Damango, which the farmers were asking that we should clarify because we have come to ascertain. And we want to use this opportunity to tell the general public and farmers that should you have any of your animal sick or dying, quickly contact the nearest veterinary center in your district so we come to avail to make sure to contain these issues in case it is those kind of diseases. How do these diseases present themselves? The pigs will show normal signs of loss of appetite, loss of weight. The unique signs is that we begin to see red patches around the abdomen, which is known as hemorrhages in medical terms, and also around the ear.
Hello, Dr. Sasu. Hi, Dr. Sasu. Can you hear me? I think Dr. Sasu's connection is acting up. Let's see if we can re-establish contact with Dr. Sasu. Dr. Sasu, can you hear me? All right, so we'll see. Let's see if we can get Dr. Sasu to clarify this matter because there's been media reports of the outbreak in parts of the northern and then in other parts of the country, and he is allaying fears of such an outbreak and want to find out. So where from these reports, and is it his, direction that we should dismiss it outright? Because the reports seem to point that it has led to the slaughter of some animals because of the outbreak, and that is what we are seeking to establish this afternoon here on the pulse. Dr. Sasu is with the Veterinary Service Department of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, and they say that this may not be new because they are yet to receive reports of swine flu outbreak in the country, and that is what he's trying to educate us on this afternoon here on the pulse on Joy News. And we'll also be delving into another national issue of, we don't have doctors, so we'll leave it here, but the assurance is that there is no such outbreak in the country. But if you experience any signs regarding your animal, please report to the Veterinary Service Department for prompt action to be taken. Now, a controversial court ruling that ordered the release of excavators seized from illegal miners has been overturned. The initial decision sparked nationwide outrage, with environmental advocates and media figures condemning it as devastating setback in Ghana's fight against deforestation and ecocide, now threatening to reverse years of hard-won progress. Now, as call for a state of emergency in the forest reserve intensify, the case has raised urgent questions about judicial accountability. Let me speak briefly to the convener for the National Coalition Against Galamsey, Dr. Kanashigbe. So, Dr. Ashigbe, this latest ruling reversing the earlier order obviously will come to you as good news.
Says that radio gets results, and the fact that the advocacy of the media works. But it raises very fundamental questions, really great questions. So the question, if you read the ruling that was given initially by the judge, it tells you that an application, an affidavit might have been filed. The question you ask, was that served on the prosecution? Was that served on the police? And then in the ruling, you don't get any mention of the prosecutor. So it will be important for the IGP to investigate whether this was served on the prosecutor, whether the prosecutor was in court or not. And the question you would want to ask, reading this second ruling that have vacated the very bad ruling that the judge did, you know, the case was even filed in the court with wrong jurisdiction. The Minerals and Mining Act gives the High Court the jurisdiction over these cases. So the question you will ask is that why was the case first filed even in a wrong court? And how is it that this judge is telling us that he did not know about the Minerals and Mining Act? He did not know about the airline that talks about the trashing of excavators and all of that, and did not know that if a crime is committed, you would want to keep the exhibit with the police before, before the case is heard. So this thing requires investigations by the Chief Justice on the conduct of this judge and then this magistrate, and also an investigation on the conduct of the police. The police prosecutors who handled this case, who filed this case in the wrong court, whether they were in court when that application that we had that got the judge to make that such a poor decision, whether that was done. But at least it is important for all those who have been advocating to realize the fact that our advocacy achieves results. And so we should not be quiet. When these things happen, we need to speak about them, and we need to be vociferous about it. So this one does not end just with the reversal of the decision. We need to ensure that those excavators are brought back, and we need to make sure that Mr. Musu and his 3 colleagues who have been found and the 2 who are on the run are all brought in, and then, prosecution happens. And if they are found guilty, because on the face of it, if you see the pictures that were had, the fact that they were found in the forest reserve without a license, with excavators which they, I'm sure, had not registered with the Minerals Commission and all of that, and were engaging in an illegality within a forest reserve, right away from the Forest Act all the way to the Minerals and Mining Act, to Act 995, the Minerals and Mining Act as amended in 2020, we should be able to throw the book at them and make sure we put them at the deepest of the courts.
I mean, it's interesting, and then sometimes you wonder whether we are getting help from the courts in terms of the fight against illegal mining. Over the weekend, for example, a mining pit led to the death of 2 individuals, some injured. There's the issue of the Western North Regional Minister as to whether he tried to halt the operations of the Forestry Commission. Last year, for example, some Chinese nationals who were involved in illegal mining, arrested, taken to court. The next court appearance, they did not show up. The police response to the court was that they died. The court says, bring me the death certificate. We are here to see the death certificate. I mean, you wonder whether other interest groups also to help in the fight are really on board in this exercise.
Unfortunately, Elton, a lot of the people who are involved in it are either complicit or are incompetent. So the issue of that police prosecutor who then said that these Chinese people had died and had been cremated, we should be asking the IGP what has happened to him. We should be asking, for disciplinary action to be taken against this particular judge, against the prosecutors who were involved in this particular issues. And then also, it is the reason why when we ask for the state of emergency to be imposed in the forest reserves and on the water bodies, because of all of these lives that are being lost and all of that, His Excellency should please listen to us. And it is also very important that currently the petition that we have asking that the LI 2462 should be revoked, that petition, now I'm sure we have crossed over 2,700 people haven't signed the petition. His Excellency should be listening to us and ask his government. The MPDC has absolute majority in Parliament. They should arrest that amendment that is currently in Parliament and replace it with a revocation instrument. And all of that also have to be revoked. But it is really going to be important that the police people, the prosecutors, the investigators, who find themselves in these mining areas, there should be a complete transfer. And most of them are either complicit or some of them are incompetent. Whatever be the case, they've been so familiar with this mining thing that they are not supporting the action. You know, that required. The Minister for Lands and Natural Resources is working his socks out to be able to get these things happening. His agencies are working to make sure these things happen. You currently have a Forestry Commission staff who is at Konfuanochi fighting for his life because he was butchered by these mercenaries that are guarding this illegal mining operation. We are at a crossroads, and the door to fight this calamity is closing on us. And all of us need to support the government, point out to them where they are going wrong, to make sure that we can arrest this situation, which has now become a major national security concern that we need to arrest because of the fact that we now have a lot of foreign mercenaries, you know, working with local collaborators who are now protecting these illegal miners, mostly in the forest reserves.
Let's leave it here for now. Dr. Ken Ashigbe is convener for the Media Coalition Against Illegal Mining. Let me take you outside the shores of Ghana, because Germany has just sent its first woman astronaut into space. She and 3 other astronauts were on a SpaceX rocket for a 4-day mission. Here with more details is DW correspondent Emily Leshner joining us from Berlin. Emily, tell us about the flight. Who is on board?
There are 4 people on this board, one of whom, as you mentioned, is making history as the first German woman in space. Her name is Rabea Roge, and she is a 29-year-old from Berlin. She studied electrical engineering and is taking on the role on this flight of scientific specialist. And along with her is a Norwegian filmmaker, as well as an Australian polar explorer and guide, and the Chinese-born billionaire named Chen Wang, who is funding the trip. He actually met Roge during a training in the past, asked if she would be interested in coming on board, provided that he fully fund her trip. She agreed, and so here we are today.
So I'm wondering, what is their mission? What are they hoping to learn from this flight?
Well, the mission is also making another historical first. For the first time in space travel history, the rocket will orbit the Earth from one pole to the other. And this is an orbit that is generally avoided because it requires a lot more energy and there is radiation risk. But this trip is short enough that radiation will not be a cause for concern for the crew. And this pole-to-pole trip is also part of how the mission, Fram 2, the flight, got its name. Fram 1 was a 19th century Norwegian polar research vessel, so the name is a nod to that vessel. And the crew is planning on conducting around 20, slightly over 20 scientific studies. They'll take the first X-ray in space. They'll also cultivate mushrooms in a gravity-free environment. And when the crew comes back to Earth, they'll attempt to do basic tasks without the typical medical assistance, just to see how they're faring.
And these days we are hearing more and more of astronauts going to space in private rockets. Are the days of government-funded space travel over? Are we shifting to a time where space travel is driven by private companies and investors?
There certainly has been a shift since about the 2010s from government-funded space travel towards travel that's funded by private companies and investors. This flight in particular is being operated by SpaceX, Elon Musk's company. Last year, SpaceX alone launched more than 100 rockets. And Musk is just one of a number of billionaires who've set their sights on space travel. There have certainly been benefits to this shift in terms of driving investment, reducing launch costs and generating excitement for the future of space travel. Even Roge remarked how this trip is helping make space travel more accessible and less exclusive than it used to be. Of course, there are also criticisms that come along with this increase in privately funded travel. There's a lot more space debris, and NASA does believe that the uptick in travel can be helping erode the Earth's ozone layer, but there definitely has been a shift in more privately funded space travel since, I would say in the last 15 years or so.
Well, thank you very much, Emily Leshner, with our partners DWTV in Berlin, Germany. And before we go, a police officer identified as Constable Kwabena Dogbe, tragically drowned this morning in the River Ofem at Asen Asaman, was participating in an operation against illegal mining. The body was recovered after a 4-hour surgery. We say condolences to the bereaved. That's our show for today. For more stories, log on to our website, myjoyonline.com. Mahama assents to amended bills, abolishing E-levy, betting tax, and others. There's also the minority issue with an aircraft that landed in Ghana, took off. They claim that it came and went with cocaine. There's an update on that on myjoyonline.com. Galamsey search for Mason miners continue after 2 bodies were retrieved. Well, folks, that's our show for today. Whatever you are up to in the hours ahead, I hope is profitable. Same time tomorrow, we shall be here. Tomorrow, we've got a national dialogue on emergency response in the country. The Ghana National Fire Service has been in the news for some reasons. We are assessing their preparedness to deal with emergency situations in the country. We are having a national dialogue on the Ghana National Fire Service. They will be here to tell their story. We've got the Ministry of Interior, we've got insurance companies, we've got victims of fires, and of course, we've got you. The dialogue is from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. here on Joy News and, of course, on Joy 99.7. I want to make a date and listen to how we can best help to put the Ghana Fire Service in a more responsible way to deal with emergency situations. But for now, my name is Elton Gobi. Have a good evening and take care.